Do you mostly follow like local news or national news?
National news and sports.
We also get our news, obviously, from on television, CNN and MSNBC.
The way they did this, the way they stole it, you know. Uh, like talking so many lies about Trump, and he ain't done nothing but help us.
This is a new dimension in sound. This is love. As the record plays, love.
Hi there, folks. I'm Keegan Van Hook, and welcome back to Us As We Are. In this episode, we are once again in Lithia Park to talk to people about where they get their news. Come on, let's go. So today we're talking to people about where they get their news. Where do you get your news?
Honestly, I get my news from all kinds of places. I mean, the most obvious one being like the internet. It's kind of hard to not get news from there because everyone shares things so freely. But I mean, I also look at the papers, and I also follow a variety of YouTube channels that I, feel. And you just kind of hear too from people. So I like hearing from people also.
Sounds like a lot of social media and word of mouth, you would say?
Yeah, I would say social media is probably the easiest, just because you get on there to see what your friends are up to, and they're like, oh, this new thing happened. Certain things are hard to avoid, like Google. You go on there to search for something, and it's just news, and you're like, okay. So some things are just unavoidable. And other than that, I do find it interesting. I do check the local papers and stuff like that. Still, I'm kind of old school like that.
Digitally.
Digitally, like online?
Yes.
What websites specifically?
Well, I moved from the Bay Area about 6 months ago, so I'm still receiving the San Francisco Chronicle.
Some from the internet, but mostly I'm old-fashioned. I like to read the newspaper.
What newspapers?
Mainly the Mail Tribune, sometimes the Oregonian.
Do you mostly follow local news or national news?
National news and sports.
We get our news from a local newspaper in Klamath Falls, which has gone from 7 days a week to 4 days a week publishing. So we're very disappointed in that, and can understand that in time there will no longer be deliveries of newspapers. It's the Herald and News, and obviously in the Klamath Falls area, subscriptions have fallen, and as a result, to save money, they've reduced the number of days that they publish, although making it available in a media forum, obviously, that perhaps younger people would be interested in obtaining. I don't know what their subscription numbers would be in terms of the social media end of it. We also get our news, obviously, from on television, CNN and MSNBC.
Primarily just the web and the local newspaper.
Social media like Facebook?
Not so much social media. Also listen to NPR is the other place, but yeah, mostly just the web and local newspaper and NPR.
On the web, what specific websites? Any news sites in particular?
I don't. NPR is one of the sites I go to, but typically I'll just Google or Bing news and see what comes up.
For sure.
Mostly the internet. There's quite a few different talk radio things, whatever they do, like blogs or whatever, that some of those guys really know what's because you can't just get your news off the TV. That stuff's all fake. Trying to say Biden's our president or something, I try to keep up with that because I think our country's in a real dilemma right now. But we got to figure out who's supposed to be running this show. I think.
Specifically, like what personalities do you follow?
I can't think of their names. Dang it.
What news story that's going on right now are you following the most closely, or that is most pertinent in your minds?
COVID-19 is the story that when we open up a paper or look at the news on television, we're interested in what's happening with the COVID-19 thing, especially since it's been badly mishandled in this country as opposed to so many other countries who are much more intelligent in their approach to minimizing the effects of COVID-19.
Could you clarify on that or expand on that a little bit? Like, what has America done wrong in your view that other countries have done right?
Well, unfortunately, our president was a denier when it came to COVID-19. It was only going to last for a little while and get over. And unfortunately, because of that stance and that ignorance, he didn't accept any scientific information, because the scientific advisors were telling him far, far different and making suggestions. However, most of those suggestions were not enacted on, or he handed them over to Ivanka, who would then rewrite them and tone down everything to make it more politically acceptable to their people.
Well, when I ask what news stories you're following, I almost should use the caveat, except for COVID-19, because of course that's everybody's major answer. So I'll ask you that. Besides COVID-19, what's going on right now that you are following?
Of course, the impeachment trial. Been watching that fairly closely on CNN or MSNBC. What else have we been?
Well, yeah, that's the big picture, and the insurrection and the fact that a staggering percentage of the people in the United States are choosing not to accept facts, but rather go looking for controversies and dwell on controversies that are so far out there that no one with a minimum amount of intelligence and critical thinking skills would begin to believe. And yet people want to believe controversies no matter how bizarre they are. And that's discouraging, and in my mind it shows quite a deterioration in our society from the society we grew up in many years ago. Both of us are originally from the Midwest, and back then the public was more interested in problem solving, common courtesy, and more of an intelligent approach to problems and so forth. And I don't see that much of that is still evident in our society.
In that, it sounds like you're most closely following sort of the news around the presidency, or what would you say is kind of the number one story or thing going on that you're paying attention to right now?
Probably that. Yeah. I've never cared anything about politics until this year. Because it's just crazy. I think we've got a clone in office. But I don't know.
Well, initially, you said you hadn't been into it for a while. What initially kind of got you back into politics this year? What was different this time around?
The way they did this, the way they stole it, talking so many lies about Trump, and he ain't done nothing but help us, He's trying to rebuild the country, and they don't like it, so they can't have him in office. I don't know. I guess that's about it. I just don't like that they stole the presidency from him and blocked him off all social media, and won't let him talk so that way they can lie about what he said. I don't know.
Well, then what news story or stories are most pertinent to you right now? What are you following closely?
Well, to be completely honest, I am following the story of my heart right now, because I find that there's so much news everywhere that it's overwhelming, to be honest with you. And I'm someone who's very empathic, and I feel everything that comes my way. So I mostly choose to follow like the path of what is in front of me. And, you know, as someone who works with people for a living, I just am choosing to deal with what's directly in front of me. And so I interpret what's going on through the people who come to me. And that's, yeah, I get snippets of information and I'm like, okay. And I try to keep a vast observational perspective on things and not think about things too much, which is why I'm walking in the park today. Because I think it's really, really important to just be with what's right in front of us, which is beautiful people, beautiful trees, a beautiful day, fresh, clean air to breathe. You know, got to maintain our sense of centeredness. Because, like, a lot of times, lots of stuff is out here all the time, and it takes us away from our bodies and what really matters, so.
Well, there's probably a few that are of concern to me. One is, of course, Biden and how he is handling the current situation in the country, and then climate change is the other big one. I like to kind of keep an eye on. Those are pretty much the basics. Yeah.
Can I ask like your opinion about how Biden is handling the country right now?
I think he's doing pretty well. I think times are pretty difficult, and I think that he's doing pretty good. You know, I think for me, one of the bigger concerns is just the division that we have in this country right now, and I think he's got an idea of how bad it is, and I think he's got some idea how to handle it. So
I didn't have much of a news day in the last few days. I just moved about a week ago, so
That's understandable.
watched a little bit about the impeachment trial. Yeah, I don't watch much TV, so I'm going to read my news basically.
Oh, politics and the coronavirus. A lot politics because of our country.
Yeah, those are pretty big webs. Any like more specifics?
Just the way Democrats and Republicans aren't getting along, and how the country's so polarized.
Yeah, a lot of people speak to that polarity. Do you have any like thoughts on how we might be able to sort of come back together from that state of being?
Well, if the Republicans and Democrats could somehow get more at the word partisan, you know, would start working together instead of viciously doing everything in their power to attack Trump, even though he's out of office. They should be focusing on other things.
Do you think like the impeachment situation that's going on right now is kind of a waste of time, maybe?
It is, because he's out of office, you know, and he did what he did, and well, whether it's important or not, I think what we should do what's more important, like the coronavirus, taking care of people, jobs, that kind of stuff.
So you'd kind of like to see us just move along and actually, you know, like tackle the problems ahead of us more than try and get retribution for what's already gone wrong?
Working on Trump for too many years, you know, and whether you like him or hate him, there's more important things going on right now. So that's why they spent 4 years trying to get rid of the guy. Now he's out of office, and they're still trying to tackle him. Whether it's right or wrong, we need to be focused on more important things.
Regardless of what like side you're on, that seems to be the big narrative, is that the other side lies. How do you think that kind of came to be, and in a situation where everybody just accuses everybody else of lying, like what can we do as a country to sort of amend this problem?
Come together and realize that all lives matter. You know, people need to realize we're all family here, or we're not going to make it. You know, media wants to divide us. You know, black, white, poor, rich, whatever. You know, and it works. It totally works. You know, they tell you what they want you to hear, and you'll just go for it, and you know, learn to hate your fellow man. You know?
That's a difficult question. Obviously, you know, in our area back in the 50s and the 60s, especially the 60s, you saw a bit of a change at that particular time in terms of a move towards a more permissive society. And I'm afraid that we've carried that aspect to too far of a degree in our society. The other thing is this. I had an example before my dad died of Parkinson's of saying, I want to thank you for the best gift you ever gave me. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, the fact that you moved our family to a farm and we worked 12 hours days, 6 days a week. And I said, nothing in my adult life has been as difficult as what I handled when I was in high school on that particular farm. So I had the opportunity, coming from a rural background, of having a work ethic installed in me. Now nowadays, I don't see as much evidence at all of a work ethic. In fact, when I talk to people who hire people for various jobs, I'm hearing that they don't want to stick around for the interview when they find out that there's a drug test that would cover the last 3 days. Many of them get up and walk out. Okay. Another person told, it happens to be my neighbor who does some interviewing, told him that he was just there because he was collecting unemployment and required for future collection of unemployment to seek out employment, but he has no intention of actually accepting any job that was offered. Other people would start and last 1 day when they found out that 8 hours was just too long of a work day, too difficult, and therefore they weren't interested in continuing. So, you know, there's part of that aspect of we made things too easy, and yes, we do have a number of assistance programs, most of which are necessary, quite frankly. But I'm afraid perhaps we've swung the pendulum too far, and that encourages people not to want to work an 8-hour day, 5 days a week.
Which is, what do you think of the news landscape as a whole? Like, do you feel that it's informative or balanced, or what would you say about it?
The news landscape as a whole. Well, I think we're living in interesting times where information is overly available to everyone, which I think is great because then people can form their own opinions about things. And it's always interesting when someone is presenting information in a certain way. I mean, I really study like humanness. I have a background in theater, and like we would observe people. And there's a certain way in which information is presented that makes it believable or believable. So it's very interesting to me that we can almost we're almost in this place where we can really think for ourselves. And I try to notice that because really like news and movies and things like that are actually manipulated to make you feel a certain way. And so when it's like the typical news that I used to watch as a kid on my TV, you know, that was like, dun 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 dun, and it's like, oh, the thing today, that's so horrible. And you're like, oh God, the thing that's so horrible. And your feelings are manipulated into feeling a certain way. However, that being said, it's like interesting to me to notice when someone's like presenting information in this way of like, I know this thing. You're like, oh, the thing. You really start to pay attention to what they're saying. So I think it's important to just keep that perspective.
Do you feel that the news you watch is balanced or informative in the sense that it's giving you like the proper information and everything like that?
Again, that's a bit of a loaded question because for example, if one were to watch Fox News, which many of our acquaintances do and thoroughly believe in, they won't accept the fact that an independent group did a study and 67% of the statements made on Fox News are not true. And they don't want to hear that. Okay, they're comfortable with that end. Now, obviously, on the other end, let's say CNN, MSNBC, I feel it's more factual news. And yes, sometimes I disagree with perhaps too much of a swinging to too much of a liberal stance on the news. But I guess I trust the news more in those venues than I would, for example, on Fox News.
I do. I think so. That was one of the problems we had with Trump, is that he made us all doubt the media, and if everything is fake news, and when in fact I think it's pretty well balanced if you go to the right places, and I think NPR is on the top of the list of presenting news in a fair way.
I'm probably speak for a lot of people that I really don't trust the main media. I think they're pretty one-sided, being liberal, but then again, that's just my opinion.
How do you think that could be improved?
Like I said, just working with the Republicans and focusing on the things that we need to be focused on instead of just Trump. It's just getting old, I mean, if they could devote half the energy they're doing towards him on what's important, like people, jobs, the virus, getting it out to people, then that's what I think. I think that doing Trump is a waste of time. They're so focused on him. They got to focus on something else. He's out of office. He's gone. It is what it is, and we just need to focus on what's going on in our country.
Great. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but is there anything else you want to add that I didn't ask about?
No, not really. That's pretty much the way I feel about things.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me.
You're welcome.
Was there anything else you want to add that I didn't ask about that you just want to sort of say?
Not really. I just wish we'd all give each other a hug.
Oh gosh, what a crazy world we live in now.
Certainly. Well, that's a great answer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
And you too. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Hey, yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for doing what you guys are doing.
Anytime.
Okay.
Have a good one.
All right, you too. Thanks.
After interviewing folks in the park, I wanted to get a little bit more input from the community at large, so I went to the Ashland Community Circle Facebook page. I set up a poll and asking where people get their news, waited a day. Here are the results. So the big winner of this poll was online newspapers concerning national/world events, followed quickly by Facebook, which being on Facebook, that isn't that much of a surprise. Later, people actually added podcasting. That was an option that I hadn't considered, and 7 people ended up voting for that. 5 for national/world TV news, 4 for radio, which again was something that I actually hadn't considered, so evidently audio is something that you all like that I don't get as much into. 2 people for local online newspapers, a single person for the physical newspaper, 1 person for Twitter, and 1 person for blogging. To try and avoid the bias that would naturally happen with just being on Facebook, I also went and set up a poll on Reddit, which did okay for the size of the Ashland subreddit. I got 0 votes for physical newspaper, 19 for online newspapers, 4 for TV news, 3 for social media, which includes Facebook, Twitter, and others, because Reddit doesn't allow you to do as long polls as Facebook did, and 0 for YouTube, because the 1 is me. Just getting it so that it'll show the results. I also set up a poll on Twitter, but nobody follows me on Twitter yet, so naturally nobody responded to that one. If you do want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at hook_Keegan. My reason for doing this is primarily a quest of curiosity. Doing what I do, the media is something that I think about a lot, and the question of where we get it is important, because whether we're conscious of it or not, the media we take in is an enormous part of how we shape our worldviews. The information I gathered might feed into a larger project I'm thinking about for down the road, but for now, I think I'm going to leave this episode here. Thank you so much for participating in the poll if you did, and for everybody else, thank you so much for watching. Before we go, I do want to mention that we, of course, have a Patreon page, so if you like what we do here and want to see this improve, please consider offering us your support. For this week, I have Adam, Amy Van Hook, and Daniel Van Hook, those last 2 being my very close relatives, to thank for their donations of $10 a month. For all of our Patreon supporters, Trip and I are recording a regular recap podcast where we go over the events that we cover on this show but discuss them from our perspective. There should be a new one of those coming out soon. With that, I've been Keegan Van Hook. This is Us As We Are, and we'll see you in the next one.
What we call sound.